Hi everyone, welcome back to geometry class. I'm Mrs. Legg, and if you've been tuning in, you know that you will be receiving information, lecture material through video if you're in my class. So, we've been talking about points, lines, and planes, and today in this video what I'm going to do is extend that and talk more about some of the pieces that tie into points, lines, and planes. Okay, so let's look at what we're going to be talking about today. The questions you should be able to answer, that you will be able to answer at the end of this video, are what are line segments and rays, and how do you name line segments and rays? Okay, so let's talk about that. The first thing we're going to talk about is a line segment. Okay, so a line segment is a piece of a line, it's a part of a line with a point at either end. We talked about lines, we talked about points in our previous video, but let's talk about what a line segment is. Okay, so we have point P right here, and we have point Q right here, and those are going to be the points that make up our line segment. These points we're going to call endpoints. The reason we call them endpoints is because they're at either end of the line segment. Okay, so just imagine you take a line and you just take a piece out of it, and on that piece you have a point at either end. That's your line segment. Okay, so points P and Q are the endpoints for this line segment. And to name a line segment, what we're going to do is take those two endpoints and use them to name the line segment. So this line segment is PQ. Like naming a line, we can actually also switch that and name the line segment QP. Okay, let's take a second and look at the notation we're using to name the line segment. So like in a line, we have this notation above the 2 points that we're using to name the line segment. We have just a bar. In the line, to name a line, we had the bar plus the arrows. But because a line segment stops at either point, we just have the bar. It does not extend like a line does. So it's just going to have the bar over the 2 points. And that means that we're naming a line segment. Okay, so how can we visualize a line segment in real life? If y'all have ever cooked spaghetti, you know that it's a very, very thin, and it stops at one point and the next point and another point. So you can imagine holding up a piece of spaghetti and you're holding up a line segment. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about how line segments can be formed. So we can actually have a line segment that can be made of smaller line segments. So in this figure, we have a couple of line segments. We have line segment PQ. P is one endpoint and Q is another endpoint. Or we can name it QP, just in the opposite order. We also have line segment QS or SQ. And then we have this longer line segment PS or SP. So a line segment doesn't necessarily have to be the longest line segment. It can be the smaller line segments, or it can be the entire length of the line segment. Okay, let's put a little bit of this to practice. So if you would like to practice on your own, go ahead and pause the video and go ahead and practice this on your own. I'm going to keep talking about the answers to these questions. So first of all, let's name this line segment. Okay, we know it's a line segment because it does not extend forever. It stops at these 2 points, so we know it's going to be a line segment. We have endpoint A and we have endpoint B, and we know that we have to name a line segment by the endpoints in either order. Okay, so we're going to have line segment AB. Remember, the notation is very important. Just the bar over those 2 points. Or BA in the opposite order. Alright, now let's practice drawing a line segment. I'm going to give you a line segment with endpoints M and N. Okay, so what I want is just a piece of a line, and then at either end I want you to draw a point and another point, and label each point 1 point M and 1 point N. There we go. So that's your line segment with endpoints M and N. Great. Okay, let's go move on to talk about rays. So a ray is also a piece of a line. It starts at an endpoint, just one endpoint, and extends forever in one direction. So how is this different than a line segment? Well, a line segment has 2 endpoints, and a ray only has 1 endpoint. Its one endpoint is Q. And instead of stopping at this next point, R, it's going to continue on forever. So it's like half of a line. It doesn't extend on forever in this direction, only in this direction. That you can see that because of the arrow right here. That tells you that it extends forever in that direction. Okay, so let's talk about how we name a ray. To name a ray, we're going to use the endpoint first. So the endpoint is the point at which the ray starts. And you can tell it starts here because it does not extend forever in this direction. It starts right here. So Q is our endpoint, and then any other point on the ray we can use to name the ray. So we start at Q, and then we use the other point R, so QR. We use this notation. It's kind of like half of the notation we used for a line. We have the bar, and then one arrow denoting which direction the ray is continuing over. Also, it tells you that Q is the endpoint because it does not have an arrow here, and R is just another point on the ray. Great. Okay, so in real life, let's talk about where we see rays all the time. So we have the sun, and sometimes you'll see the sun coming through the clouds like this. So you can see these rays of sunlight. And that's a ray because the sun is like the endpoint. It's the starting point of the ray. And then you can imagine that the ray just continues on forever. Some rays get to Earth and some rays just extend forever into space. Okay, let's talk about a very specific type of ray. The ray we're going to be talking about right now is opposite rays. Okay, and opposite rays, they always come in pairs. There are two rays that have a shared endpoint and form a line. Okay, let's talk about the shared endpoint. A shared endpoint means it's going to have the same endpoint. Okay, we know how we're going to tell which endpoint, what's the endpoint of these opposite rays, is look at just the point that's in between the 2 points that form the other two rays. Okay, so point Q is the shared endpoint for the two opposite rays here. Point P is a point that the ray extends through here, and point R is the point which this ray, QR, extends through here. Okay, so let's name this pair of opposite rays. We have opposite rays QP. Q is named first because it's the endpoint for this opposite ray, this ray. And P is just a point that it extends through. So we have QP, and then we have ray QR. So when we have the two rays together, they form a line. And this line would be called line PR or line PQ. Okay, let's put some of these, the rays and opposite rays to practice. Let's do a little practice here. Okay, so let's name the ray that we have here. So we have endpoint A. We know it's the endpoint because it does not extend forever in this direction. It's going to start at endpoint A, but it's going to extend forever through point B. So remember, we name an array by starting at the endpoint and then use the second point. So this is going to be ray AB. Look at the notation we're using right here. Okay, great. All right, so our second question, let's draw a ray with endpoint C that extends through point D. So we know we're going to start at point C. I want you to draw point C and then draw a ray through point D. So it's just going to look like that. Start at point C, it's our endpoint, and the ray extends through point D. Great. All right, our last question right here. We want to name these two opposite rays. Okay, so like we had discussed before, point F is going to be our endpoint because it's going to be in between these other 2 points that the ray, this ray, and this ray extend through. So let's start with this ray right here. Okay, our endpoint is F, and the point that the ray extends through is E. So I'm going to write F first, then E, with the notation in the right direction. Okay, even though the ray is going to the left, I'm going to rearrange the way the letters are ordered so that F comes first because it's the endpoint, and E comes second because it's just the point that the ray extends through. And note the notation still says that point F is the endpoint. Okay. We also have this ray. F is the endpoint, and G is just the point that the ray extends through. So we have ray F, G. And again, look at the notation we're using. Great. Okay. All right, guys, this is going to be a really short video. Let's review what we've learned today. So we have line segment AB or BA here with endpoints A and B. Great. We've learned about rays. So right here we have ray AB, and our endpoint is A. That's where the ray begins. All right, and then we've learned about opposite rays, a special type of pair of rays that forms a line. So we have endpoint F, and then we have, for this single ray, we have FE. And then for this ray, we have FG. Our endpoint is F. Great, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. Talk to you next time.